FBI Director Wray's testimony was a national embarrassment. Hello, everyone. Dr. Chris Martinson here with a short take. I just couldn't let this go. There's so much flying by right now. We have to talk about this real quick and let us listen in very quickly to this astonishing testimony.
Did Crooks fire 8 shots?
We have recovered 8 cartridges on the roof.
Yeah, they're not called cartridges. Obviously, they are spent cases.
Did Crooks?
These are cartridges. I've covered this before, but I'm just going to put this in one spot so we can look at all of his embarrassing statements in one spot. These are cartridges. They're fully loaded. They have bullets, powders, primers, and cases. These are spent cases. Now, what's interesting is you might think, oh, well, he misspoke. You know, it happens. People, you take lots and lots of images of what's going on, and people will eventually say something wrong. Happens to me. I get it. Here he is again under different circumstances.
Director Wray, for being here. How many shots did the shooter fire?
Well, we know that he fired at least 8 because we recovered 8 cartridges on the roof.
Okay, and are all the cartridges...
Did you hear that again? We know that he fired 8 because we found 8 cartridges.
And the
said it again.
unspent bullets, have they been... You know how many there are? You've accounted for all of those?
We
I assume, yeah.
We believe we have. We believe we have. Again, there was lots of work still ongoing, but yes, we believe we have accounted.
And did the recovered shells, the cartridges, match the shooter's rifle?
My recollection is yes.
My recollection?
And you conducted an analysis that confirms that?
Well, we work with ATF, but yes, so some of the work has been divided up. But.
And how many shells casings were recovered from the location of the counter snipers?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the last part.
From the counter snipers location?
That I don't have the answer, at least here at my fingertips.
Okay.
Okay. So he doesn't know that these things match the gun. He called them cartridges one more time, which is a mistake. They're not. They're not cartridges. Or if they were cartridges, what are we doing collecting, fully live rounds from a roof? And then he said, I don't know. We haven't bothered, collecting anything from the counter snipers. We don't, haven't done that. So the most basic thing you have to do in an investigation, of course, that involves a shooting is you got the perp, you got the gun, and you got the bullets and spent cases and also the rounds that went down range. The most simple thing you got to do, first thing you're going to spend a lot of time doing is making sure that you understand what happened. And that flow of events involves the guns, right? So in this case, I think there were at least 2 perp guns, and then we know we have a counter sniper unit gun, and then we also have emergency services unit gun. So Biggs was asking the right question. He said, have you recovered the spent shells from the snipers, plural? That's the correct question. So it wasn't just an accident that Christopher Wray used the word cartridges. This is what is being done to intentionally muddy the waters. When you want to throw shade on an investigation, when you want that investigation not to go well, you start having trouble with timelines, you start inserting facts that don't exist, you start removing facts that should exist, you just start doing things like that. And by the time people have fought their way through that thicket, well, it's kind of like trying to get an insurance payout from an insurance company for your health claims. You're just gonna get the runaround, and they know that 9 out of 10 people are going to give up before they get to the goal line, and that's their business model. Well, the business model of Christopher Wray here is to clearly throw shade on this investigation and stonewall it and make it go as slowly as possible. So that's how I'm interpreting that, but it gets worse. So let's keep going. So let's contrast now something that he didn't want to necessarily. So here's the places that we know that Christopher Wray, FBI Director Wray, is going to be completely clueless about. What's the actual timeline? Where were the Secret Service agents? Who was in Building 2? Did an ESU agent take a shot? That's all stuff that he's going to be like, I don't know. What's the question? I'm confused. It's can you rephrase it? But when it's something that's totally irrelevant, has nothing to do with the investigation's actual outcome or how it can be interpreted, this is what it sounds like when he's being on the job and on the ball.
I believe so, but as I sit here right now, I don't remember.
Okay. You mentioned about 2 hours before the incident that he'd had a drone and he was using a drone. Instead of me putting words in your mouth, just tell me how you discovered the drone, how you discovered the time, and how you discovered, if you can describe what he would have been observing with the drone and how you determined that, please.
So this is something that's very much ongoing right now. We're going back and forth with our lab as they continue to do work on it. What I would say is the drone was in his car.
Definitive
as I
placement.
said, we've been able to, by exploiting the drone, determine its use and flight paths. There were no pictures or videos on the drone of the day of the rally, for example, but we have been able to reverse engineer the flight path of the drone from the day of the rally, and that's how we know that for about 11 minutes, from I think it's around 3:50 p.m. to 4 p.m., somewhere in that range, he was flying the drone, and we have the flight path. It's about 200 yards away from where former President Trump would ultimately be speaking. And so that would have primarily given him a vantage point. I'm trying to think how to describe this. If the former president's podium is that way,
yeah,
the drone would be over here looking, say 200 yards again off this way, looking back. So it would have shown the shooter, we think, again, we're still doing more work on this. So I really want to qualify what I'm saying, but I'm trying to be transparent and lean in here. We think it would have shown him kind of what would have been behind him.
But when you say behind him, behind the shooter.
Correct. Like, in other words, almost like giving him a rear view mirror of the scene behind him, except, again, he wasn't flying it overhead while he was later back for the assassination.
But he would have had, with the drone, he would have been able to also assess kind of what, because the stage, I assume, was already set, he would have been able to assess that angle with the rooftop as well, forward and backward, I assume.
Well, certainly going towards the podium. Again, we're still trying to figure out exactly what he saw, because we're having to, in effect, because there's no recording of what he saw during those 11 minutes, our hypothesis at this point, the experts think he would have been live streaming it. And so we're trying to, in effect, say, okay, if this was the flight pattern, given these capabilities of the drone, what would you have seen? What could you have seen?
Okay. So let's review here. When it comes to something like the drone, which is going to turn out to have no bearing on this whatsoever, really, honestly, except for some questions that are now raised about that, but I'll get to it quickly. Because the drone has no bearing whatsoever on whether there was two shooters or any of that stuff, boy, watch them burrow in. They have the lab working on it. They could back engineer its flight patterns from onboard data. They could calculate where it was. They could interpolate what views he must have seen. They can assume or hypothesize that he must have live streamed it. So maybe he was just looking at the whole thing on the screen. They're going on and on about this. They recovered it from his car. They have a hypothesis, a theory. They got data. That's what it sounds like. But when this guy's asked, like, did the gun have a scope? He's like, I don't know that, right? The drone is completely irrelevant. The gun is completely relevant, right? And if he had been asked he should be able to recount with the same detail. Look, the guy's not a complete moron. He can recount stuff, 11 minutes, flight times, patterns, hypotheses, lab. He's got the drone all worked out. But you ask him about the gun, and all of a sudden he goes all like, oh, that's a tough one. You wasn't prepared for that question, right? Within minutes of that shooting, he should have been able to recite the serial number of the gun, where it was first bought, how many times they estimated it had been fired, what kind of a trigger break it had on it, whether it had any modifications, the exact type of optics it was on there, etc., and so forth. Simple stuff. So I just wanted to play this, although it was kind of long and boring. This just demonstrates that Director Wray, we had no evidence up to this point that the guy could actually form thoughts from memory, that like he'd heard something important about the investigation, he could recall it. So here he did. So clearly he has that capability, which is good to know. But it's about something that's completely irrelevant. What are we going to hear about next? The types of brake pads in the most recent brake job that Crooks' car had? I don't want to know about that. I want to know about the actual relevant details. So that was kind of interesting to me that we saw that. And by the way, I'm not going to subject you to it, but it turned out that Director Wray didn't know anything about the scope either. He didn't know a lot about anything. And Nobody's asking the appropriate questions here yet, which is who was the special agent in charge there? And we need to talk to him. And can you account for the ESU sniper shot that was taken? Exactly where was that shot taken from? And we need to see the very first camera feeds of the very first people on the roof. Absolutely. Even though we now know there was a 12-minute gap between the last shot fired and the first Pennsylvania LEO on the roof, but there's all kinds of other ways to access that roof. So we need to know, did anybody else go up on that roof? And finally, we need to know, why was that crime scene being walked all over by 8 or more individual people up there? It's just insane. None of this makes a lick of sense. But I can tell you for a fact, that drone footage, or whatever Crooks was doing with the drone, almost entirely irrelevant to this because of the level of detail and precision that FBI Director Wray brought to that part of the conversation. That's all I got for now. Thanks very much. We'll see you next time. Bye.